Hi there everybody, and welcome to another episode of Miss Evil Knits on Creativity. And this is episode 4. The last episode, episode 3, was all about inspiration and where you can find inspiration. This episode will be more focused on skills and knowledge and that you need to be able to be creative. And what we will focus on is the skills and knowledge connected to constructing sweaters. If I should count all the different projects that I have knitted, I think that at least 50% would be sweaters of different kinds. And if I should, which I haven't done, if I should browse through all the different patterns that are available on Ravelry, I would guess that at least 50% of those patterns are sweaters. So there are many knitters that are knitting sweaters, and there are many designers that are designing sweaters. So I see that sweaters are very central in knitting. So that's why I want to focus on the construction of sweaters. And I think that to kind of master the construction of a sweater connected to your or the person they're going to wear the sweater, their body type and form and preferences, to be able to shape that to make it like perfect fit. I think that's a skill that I am always aiming for. I sat down and took some notes to be able to record this episode. What should I talk about? And I realized that it's quite a lot that you need to talk about when it comes to construction of sweaters and how to get a good fit. And I realized that I will not be able to cover this for 100%. Because I will probably forget what I should have said, but also because I am not 100%. I am learning every day that I am knitting sweaters how I can improve myself and understand different constructions and how to get a nice fit. So see this more as a kind of introduction, because I want you to see that there are many different constructions and that you can find the one that is your favorite and maybe pick from everything to be able to make what suits you, but also to be encouraged to continue learning, continue being curious, finding other ways of constructing your sweater. I will talk about my favorite constructions. There are many ways. I am always interested in learning new ways to construct. I'm not that very fond of like weird constructions, because I want to have new way, or I want to learn new way of constructing, but not with a purpose. I don't want to have a weird construction just because I want to have a weird construction. I want to have other different construction and learn it because it's clever. These are smart. There is a designer that really master this construction thing and has developed something that is better than many other designs or constructions. So when I say that I like to learn new other ways of construction, that's what I'm after, to finding these clever constructions, not weird because it's weird. Okay, I think that we should start. When I say that I will talk about my favorite, it is the first thing that I haven't written it because it's so obvious. It is that I more or less always knit seamless. So there are, like, either you knit pieces and then seam them together, or you knit a seamless construction. And I will talk about seamless constructions. I have in the beginning, when I learned to knit, then it was to knit pieces and then seam them together. Because I thought that that was the only way, and that maybe was the only way that was available to learn. But when I learn more and more, I see that the most clever way of knitting and constructing is to do it seamless. Otherwise, I can buy fabric and use a sewing machine instead to get another garment. So I will focus on seamless constructions. And as many of you might know, because you have heard me and watched me previous, is that I'm not really that fond of picking up stitches. So I'm also trying to find constructions that are just knitted from top to bottom in one piece, more or less. And when I bind off, the last stitch is done. So that's what I'm looking for all the time. So I will talk about seamless constructions mainly. The other choice that you probably will make is top down or bottom up. And there are many designs for both these, top down and bottom up. I prefer the top down construction. And it is mainly because it's easy to try on as you knit to get a good fit. And I find that I can modify the sweater much better. It's easier to modify it, and I get a better result if I'm knitting the top-down version. Negatives, or the cons with a top-down, is that it can be quite voluminous, we call it. It comes heavy in the end, because then you have everything at the same time. A bottom-up construction, then you knit 3 pieces. You knit the body and then the 2 arms, and then you put it together. Then you can actually, it's a bit easier if you want to carry it with you when you're going on a trip, or knit on it at work, or when you're commuting or something. But I prefer the top-down construction. I have tried bottom-up. I know how to make bottom-up. I have knitted, the first seamless construction I knitted was always bottom-up, like this Icelandic sweaters and so on. But when I started doing the top-down and I learned that construction more and more, then it has been my always go-to construction, no matter of which kind of construction I make. So I prefer top down. So that is what I will talk about mainly. So that is like the general construction, and I prefer seamless and top down constructions. And I think there are more and more both knitters and designers that are going for that. When I think sweater constructions, I mainly think what differs between them, it is the shoulder area, how you actually put in the arms. That is very much, there you have the different ways of doing that. So that is mainly what I'm going to focus on. But we are going to look at how you can modify the other parts of the sweater as well. But I think that the simplest way of knitting a sweater, either if you do it top down or bottom up or knit it in pieces, it is this, I call it dropped shoulder construction. It's like you knit a tube or pieces that you seam together, and then you leave the armholes, and then you pick up stitches and knit downwards, or you have a sleeve that you just seam attach to the sweater. So it's quite squarey, call it squarey. But it's also, you can make this boxy fits or boxy sweaters with that. So it's 2 squares, seam them together, pick up stitches, and then knit. And that means that you usually get a little bit dropped. So the seam will be a little bit dropped and coming here, and then you have a little bit more roomy, boxy shape of a sweater. So this kind of dropped shoulder construction. And when you look at sweaters that you buy in a shop, it's very often this kind of dropped shoulder construction that you see that it's a seam coming here. And that kind of construction is very simple. I think that for a beginner that want to knit their first sweater, that's a simple way. And it can be a really nice fit to it. It looks very stylish, and when you also have it oversized in a little more boxy. But what you need to think about there is, what kind of fabric am I using? Because I think you want to have a little bit more heavy fabric that gives you a nice drape, and not this fluffy light, because then it will probably just look like a tent. So a little bit more heavy, like linen, cotton, like this, a little bit more heavy, drapey, superwashed merino wool also can have that kind of heavy, drapey feeling to it. So dropped shoulders, I probably knitted a few of those back in the days. It's not a construction that I choose now to knit, because I'm not really, I don't know, I don't really like this kind of seam. Even if you're picking up stitches, it's still like you have a kind of, you see this here. And I don't know, I don't find it, that construction very versatile. It's simple, it's easy to make, but it's not that versatile, because it's difficult to make like a stranded pattern or something. Yeah, but that's one construction. One of my favorite construction, it is the raglan. And I think that one is, it is simple. I think that it gives a nice fit for most people. It's versatile because you can adapt it to many ways. You can use it for, you can use this for having a stranded yoke, you can have it for texture, and you can also adapt it for different body shapes that we'll talk a little bit about later. And the raglan is basically, you mark 4 places around there where you have like the body arm, what do you call it? It goes from the neck to the armpit, and here you increase. And just generally, if you don't have any pattern for this, I usually increase every second round, 1 increase on each side of the marker that I have here until the yoke is large enough, and then maybe continue a little bit more to make it deep enough to the armpit, and then you put the stitches that should be the arm on hold, and then you pick up stitches or cast on stitches under the arm. So it's a very simple, and what you can modify it and adjust it and adapt it to different body shapes is that you don't have to do the increases like symmetrically. You can do more or less increases on the arm or the body, so that you actually are shaping it to your body, and it's very easy to do that. And if you do it top down, you try it on and measure and get a feeling for, do I need to increase more or less? So I think it's stylish. I think that this gives a very nice fit, especially if you have a little bit wider shoulders, but also if you have a little bit more narrow shoulders, because you can adapt it to different body shapes. So I like the raglan construction, and you can make this kind of raglan seam in different ways. Sometimes it's just like the increases. You can make a cable, you can make it wide and narrow, and so on. So raglan is really a favorite of mine, and you can knit it top down and bottom up. If you make it bottom up, you just do the decrease instead in the same way, but I prefer the top down for raglan construction. This sweater is not 100% knitted from the pattern, but it's inspired by a sweater called Blue House by Heidi Kermeyer, and I think that is a very nice basic pattern to use. And Heidi she writes very good patterns, so it's easy to follow, and I think that the fits is perfect. Yeah, the raglan. I like, and I always come back to the raglan construction because I like it. I think it's versatile. That would be interesting to see. The next construction that I want to talk about, it is the circular yoke. You see it in stranded yokes when you have this Icelandic or Icelandic inspired sweaters, but you can also have it in just in one color, or you can have it with cables or texture or something else. I have one here with just in one color. And I think that the circular yoke is the best construction if you want to have a color work in a yoke, because you can, if you have it in a raglan, you will have to adapt it to the raglan, because you have the increases and it will be like a little bit more square in the color work. So it can be a little bit more difficult, and sometimes it doesn't look so neat here, because yeah, you have the color and you need to do color changes and so on. So if you want to have like a stranded knitted color work in a yoke, I think that the circular yoke construction is best for that. What can be a challenge when it comes to the circular yoke? It is, if you're following a pattern for the circular yoke, you will see that it's kind of a piece of cakes. You will see in the pattern where you're going to do the increases. And in general, you will do most of the increases in the beginning of the yoke, and then you continue, but you do less increases when you're further down. But that is a challenge. It's difficult to adapt these increases for your body type because it's a part of the pattern. So it can be a little bit more challenging to actually make it fit perfectly. And depending on if you have wide or narrow shoulders, the sweater you have knitted can fit either perfectly or really poor. Because if the increases are made for someone with a little bit more narrow shoulders and you have wide shoulders, it will fit really poorly. And also vice versa. If you have narrow shoulders and you have knitted with a lot of stranded knitted color work, maybe even 3 colors sometimes, the yoke will be quite big, and you have a risk that it actually looks a little bit too bulky on you because the increases are placed for someone with more wide shoulders. So I think that there are many that feels like that the circular yoke doesn't really fit them, and I think that then you shouldn't give up. You should try to find a designer that do the increases in the way that fits your body. So if you have wide shoulders, you need to have a lot of increases in the beginning. If you have narrow shoulders, you don't want to have too much increases in the beginning because then it will get a little bit too big. You can also find that you might feel a little bit broad because that if you have a color work and it goes like horizontal, that the lines becomes like it creates a horizontal pattern. It can feel like you get a little bit broad over your shoulders, especially if you are already have wide shoulders, and for that reason feel like it's not really your cup of tea. But there are a lot of these yoke patterns that are more of horizontal lines, no, vertical lines, that can make a better looking, like a better pattern for your body type. So circular yoke are a genius construction, but it can be a little bit challenge to find a yoke that really fits you, and it's a little bit more difficult to adapt it compared to the raglan construction, where it's quite easy for you to adapt it to your body. I think that the circular yoke that I prefer, it is the one that is just in one color. And I think that if I find a design like how the increases are made that fits me, I think that the circular yoke, the one color circular yoke, it's really pretty. And a designer that I like, that I feel like, okay, her, like, what do you call it? Like a schedule for the increases that fits my body. It is a Danish designer, Camilla Wad. And she has several of these one color, multicolors, like stranded and knitted yoke, but also the just one color yoke. And this one, I don't remember from which pattern this one is inspired. But I think that, yeah, it becomes really pretty, and it's a stylish garment. What can be a challenge when you have like a circular yoke with just one color. It is to make the increases neat. When you have a color work, you can always hide the increases or decreases if you do it bottom up in the color work, so it doesn't become too obvious. But if you are knitting just in one color, you need to find a way to do these, to do the increases really neat, or make it become a part of the like it should look intentional, that it's that you see it. But this Camilla Wad, she has I like her pattern, and she has suggestions on which kind of increases that you should use, so it will be less obvious where they are. So the circular yoke. And then we have the continuous sleeve. I think it was a designer called Susie Myers that developed it, and that most designers are referring to continuous sleeves by Susie Myers. And it's a design for that construction in the sweater I am wearing. This is the Versal by Albina McLaughlin. And I don't think that you should be intimidated by the continuous sleeve, because it's just a simple construction as the raglan. It just looks a little bit different. And when you knit a raglan construction, you usually increase on every second round, because you increase on 4 different places, and you increase 2 stitches on every of those places. So in total you increase 8 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8 stitches on every second round. So that is kind of like an increase schedule that you need to have. And if you do the continuous sleeve, you only have you have 4 markers, but you only increase 1 stitch on each marker, and that means that you will have to increase on every round to get the same effect. And you start by making this kind of saddle here, and that means that you have a marker, and then you increase on the outside, on the body side of this marker on every round, until it reaches your, like, the highest part of your shoulder, before it starts like sloping down. And then you start increasing on the inside of the marker on every round until you have shaped like the shoulder, and then you do increases every second round. So it's a little bit more, it's not really as simple as the raglan, but it's not complicated. It's just that you need to understand and take help from a pattern on how long you should do the different increases. I think that this construction is very good if you have broad shoulders. I guess that it fits someone with narrow shoulders as well perfectly, but especially if you have wide shoulder, I think that this is a really nice fit. And I also know that for someone with wide shoulders or large shoulders, it can be difficult to find clothes that have a good fit for you. And I think that using this continuous sleeve, you get a very fitted construction. So it looks fitted. And there is another construction that is called this set-in sleeve, that this one, the continuous sleeve, is like the seamless, or do not have to pick up any stitches version of the set-in sleeve as I see it, because the set-in sleeve is more or less that you are knitting and the body front and back, and then you're seaming it together, and then you pick up stitches, and then you form it with short rows. And by the continuous sleeve method you get that more or less, but without picking up the stitches. And this Versal, this pattern, it is also a very good basic pattern to use as a basic pattern if you want to learn the continuous sleeve method and to modify from that construction. There are, of course, a lot of other different ways of constructing. You can knit a sweater from one arm, you knit the arm and then all the way over to the other side. That's one, I don't know what that construction is called. And there are probably a lot of different kind of construction. But what I've been talking about now is what I prefer and what I think is you should start with and understand those type of construction. And they have pros and cons in different situations. So to master the raglan, the circular yoke and the continuous sleeve, if you have those in your toolbox, then you are well prepared to be able to either design your own sweaters or modify sweaters or just be able to knit sweaters with a very good fit. Yeah, talking about fit. For a sweater to look pretty, I think that it needs to have a good fit on the person who is wearing it. And that is a challenge because we look different. And yeah, you should try to find the fit in your garment so it fits your body. It shouldn't hide your body. It should have a fit that shows your body. And since our bodies are different, we need to be able to get a nice fit. We need to understand our bodies and understand the construction so we can adapt that to each other. Many times I see if it's a good designer, the designer will in a pattern advise you on how you can modify something. So try to find those designers that understand, because it's challenging for a designer to write patterns. They usually scale it for different sizes, and the size is usually like the bust measurement. But we are not just women that have small or large busts. We look different in other places as well. So just that it has different size doesn't mean that a design fits everyone. So to understand how you can modify something fit wise, I think that is very good. I think that for me, I have always a challenge when I go to a shop to buy clothes. I'm quite tall. I'm like 178 or 79 centimeters tall. I have long arms, long legs. I have relatively wide shoulders. I have I have some kind of waist. I have wide hips. And I feel that if I go in and buy a garment on like the ladies, the ladies' room, not the ladies' room, but that are for ladies. What do you call it? But if I should buy a shirt or something, I find that if I buy something that fits my waist, it's too narrow over the shoulder and the arms are too short. And if I take something that fits over the shoulders, the arms are usually too short still, and it's like a tent. So I have difficulties finding garments that fits, especially when it comes to the upper body, because they have so many different measurements that needs to fit for the garment to fit. But when I'm knitting, I can decide for myself. I can decide the width of the shoulders, the length of the arms, and so on and so on. So I guess maybe that's why I like knitting. I can make my garments the way I want them and need them to be. So I have my preferences on how I want things to be, and yeah, I can decide myself. Now I'm just babbling. But I thought that we should just talk about it, and we start at the neck. And don't worry, I will talk about these short rows and lengthening the back and so on a little bit later. But when it comes to the neck, we have different preferences here as well. And just because something is said in a pattern doesn't mean that you want to have it in that way. So either you want to have a wide neck because that's what you like, or you want to have a more narrow neck, or you want to have a high neck because you want it to be warm, or you want to have a low neck, and so on. That is things that is quite easy to modify how you want your neck and collar to be. What you should always remember is that don't make it too narrow, because you have to put your head through it so you can actually put the garment on. Something that I have noticed on some sweaters I have is that the neckline or the neck can start to grow, so it like falls down a little bit, because yeah, especially if you have rib around the neckline or in the collar, you can start like a growing, so it like the sweater is slipping down from you. What you can do, a modification, if you have already a garment that starts doing that, you can use a crochet hook and like crocheting a chain. Do you call this kind of chain crochet stitches, either on the outside, so you do it like horizontal along the neckline, or on the inside if you don't want it to be shown. That makes it a little bit more steady or stable or structured. You can also do it, make this kind of, what do you call it, Latvian braid, to do it here when you knit it. Just to have it a little bit more, so it's not that elastic. You want it to be elastic, but not too elastic. What I have done on this one, I don't know if you can see it. I have made an I-cord. So I made an I-cord, attached it in the round, and then I picked up stitches and knitted downwards, and then I picked up stitches and knitted up. So the I-cord is horizontal and the stitches are vertical. So since it's horizontal, it will give it a little bit more stability and it will not stretch too much. So that's a way of doing it. If you are, sometimes recommend that you are just casting on the stitches and knitting, and then you're picking up stitches to knit the collar. And that you can think that that's I don't want to pick up stitches, But doing that way also makes a little bit more stable neckline that will not stretch so much that it starts falling down and revealing a little bit too much of your body. So that about the neck, the color. When it comes to the bust, and I must admit that I am not that good on modifying a garment based on the bust, because I have not that much here, so I haven't been challenged with modifying to have a nice fit over the bust. But I think that what we need to be aware of it is that, now I'll try to explain it. You have a bust size, or if you're measuring over the bust, you get one measurement. But you have also the chest rib. If you measure over there, then you have another measurement. And if you have a large bust, there will be a lot difference between the bust and the chest. If you have a small bust, it's not that big difference between the measurement. And the busts are here, it's not up here. And I think that if you choose, just because you have a large bust doesn't mean that you have wide shoulders. It's not automatically there. It's just you have large breasts. And you can have a narrow waist, you can have a larger waist. It's like, it doesn't always go linear, and it's connected to each other. But what I think is that if there is a pattern that says that you should choose size from bust size, it doesn't automatically mean that you will have a nice fit over the shoulders. So I want to have patterns that are not only referring to bust sizes, I want to have it on chest sizes, that is like over the bust and under the arms, because this is the measurement you need when you are done with the yoke. It should fit there. So you don't end up with, just because you have large bust, you don't end up with a yoke that is like huge, because you don't have your boobs up here, you have them here. It's under your arms, at least on me. So we need to differ between the shoulders and the bust, and to be able to adapt to a larger bust, there are methods like casting on more stitches under the arm, and there are also these different kind of way of increasing for the bust, and you can search for bust darts. So there are different way of increasing and also decreasing afterwards. Because also, if you have chosen a large size because for the shoulders, or the size because you have big breast, you don't have the boobs on your back, and it can also mean that you get a sweater that is very large over the back, and you don't want to have that. You don't have the back boobs. So look into the bust darts and check out a pattern, what it has for the chest measurement and the shoulder measurement, to make sure that you don't get too much fabric, because you need the bust fabric here and not the extra fabric here. It should fit nicely over your shoulders. Was that clear? And especially when it's circular yokes, because as I said, when it comes to raglan, you can adapt a little bit more when it comes to increases and don't do any increases. But when it comes to a circular yoke with color work, it's a little bit more difficult to adapt it. Yeah, but measurements, so you are choosing the right measurements for your size. You can adapt it by the stitches you are casting on under the arm, and also these bust stars, like increasing and decreasing to compensate for bust, and then decreasing afterwards, so that you are actually having a sweater that fits nice on your waist and over your back. And when it comes to the back, there is always this discussion on to raise the neck or raise the back, so that you don't get a neckline that is uncomfortable. And let's see if we can make this. So that one is usually sold by these short rows, and it causes a lot of trouble for many people. So we start just looking at, maybe it's difficult with color. We start. If I want to have like a lower neckline in front, I want it to be like here, because here is where I have my collarbones, they meet. If I have it higher up, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's like here. Here my neckline should start. But when I go back on the neck instead, maybe I want the neckline to start up here instead. And then you see that between there and here, it's, I don't know, it's quite a difference. So what I want to have my neckline here and my neckline starting here. It's, yeah, I cannot see, but I would think that it at least differs 5 centimeters. So that means that to have a nice fit, I want my back, the piece here back, to be higher, above, maybe say 5 centimeters higher up than the piece here, to be able to have it comfortable. If you don't do that, then you will either have the neckline to sit very low in the back, and that might be nice, but it can also be that it's a little bit chilly over your neck. Or if you raise it, you make it high, then it can be like, okay, it's comfortable in the back over the neck, but it's a little bit too high in the front. That makes it like push in on your throat and making it a little bit, it feels weird, like having something high here and low there. And the way to modify it and compensate for that, yeah, we are not symmetric on the back and the front. You can use these short rows. No, I haven't used it. I'm not really using that method, but I try to explain it a little bit here. It's basically that you are short rows, and you shouldn't mix the short rows. It is that you're actually knitting and turning and knitting back and turning. So you're making shorter rows. You're not going the whole round. You are making short rows. And the way you turn, then you can use different techniques. For example, these wrap and turn, the shadow wrap, the German short rows. It's actually just the turn, how you're turning it, so it won't make any holes afterwards. But Google it to find out more. So to raise the neck, what you usually do, it is that you put your markers somewhere, and then you knit from the start and to a marker on, like in the front, and then you knit as long as that, and then you knit a little bit longer, and then you go knit a little bit longer, and then a little bit longer, and a little bit longer, and then you continue like that for maybe 4, 5, or 6 times. What is important to do when you do this, it is that you need to start increasing. Because if you do this on a raglan and you just go back and forth and don't start the raglan increases, then you will get this kind of chimney. Because as I told you when it comes to the circular yoke, that the increases in the beginning is important to get it wide enough over the shoulders. So I have seen many sweaters where the knitter have used the short rows, but instead of just raising the back, it has more or less just raised the neck and created some kind of chimney, and it's not good looking at all. It looks very strange. So you need to start in these short rows you make, you need to incorporate the increases, either for the raglan or for the circular yoke. So a good design has already incorporated that and helped you with it. And it's the same with the Versal. In the Versal it is included. So just follow the patterns and you will know how to have the short rows and starting to do the increases while you're doing the short rows. Another way of making sure that you have this raised neck or the longer back, that's what it's all about. It is that you are not, when you're casting on, you're not casting on and making it a circle and start knitting. You are casting on just for the neck, and then you're knitting back and forth and are increasing a few stitches every round until you can cast on for the front. And then you have already, because you're knitting back and forth like you do the short rows, but now you're just turning, then you raise the neck already from the start. But then you need to pick up stitches to make the collar after that. So that is like the usual way before people start using the short rows. I do this in another way that is my favorite, because I find that the short rows, I know how to do them, but it could be like even if you have a good turning technique, it's always a little bit, some holes, and it looks a little bit disturbed. So I have another way that I want to show you. I have shown this in my Swedish podcast a couple of times, and it's always a lot of questions connected to it. But I remind you, I will try to explain this as thorough as I can, but I will not answer questions on this one. You just have to try it out and think and try to solve the problems that you see can come up. And I think I will show you, I can show you on this one. And this is a technique that I learned in a pattern by Helene Magnusson, an Icelandic French designer. And it was a sweater like this stranded yoke sweater that's called Frøykorn. And I think that this is a more traditional Icelandic way of actually raising the neck or raising the back. And I find it so simple. It's genius. This is a sweater. It's a Lunenburg by Amy Christoffers, Savory Knitting. But I have modified it to fit in the Nutiden yarn. And I haven't finished the sleeves yet, but that's good, because I can show you how I do raising my back on this one. What I do, this is a top down. I can show it to you, top down. So what I do when it's time, the yoke is done, it's time to set the arm stitches aside. Instead of casting on these stitches under the arm, before I do that, I knit back and forth on the back piece of the garment. So back and forth. So you see here that I have just knitted back and forth here, and I have knitted, yeah, about that, could be 4 or 5 centimeters long, just back and forth. So no short rows turns or something, I'm just knitting back and forth. Then I start knitting in the round again, and I cast on some stitches under the arm and just continue knitting the body. So knitting back and forth for that length that I want to lengthen the back, and then doing just as usual. And then when it's time to knit the arms, I do as usual, I pick up those stitches that is on the thread now. I pick up the stitches that I have casted on, and I pick up those stitches that comes from me lengthening the back. And there you see probably that, okay, now I will have more stitches for the arm than what is probably stated in the pattern. Yes, I will. So by making this, I will get more stitches for the arm. And for me, I think that's good, because many sweaters are in the pattern quite narrow over the arms. So that's a good way. But it also means that for me, since I'm not usually following the patterns letter by letter, I know that, okay, I will already have some extra stitches for my arm. It means that I can choose a size that is maybe a little bit smaller than I want for my chest size, but since I know that I have broad shoulders, a little bit more narrow in the body, and I don't want to be too big, I can choose that size, and I can borrow stitches, for example, for the back and the front from like the arm stitches, because I know that I will have extra stitches. So I can modify it and use those extra stitches in the way when I divide the stitches between the front, the arms and the back. If you don't understand how to do that, it's like, okay, pick them up and then do the decreasing a little bit quicker without making it just bulky. Or if you don't understand how to do that, don't choose this method. Do the ordinary short row that is stated in the pattern. But if you can see and understand how you can modify and either use or make use, and how you can handle these extra stitches, it's usually about maybe between 4, 5, 6, 7 extra stitches that I pick up. Then I think that this is a wonderful method of lengthening the back, because you are lengthening the back. The back is becoming a little bit longer compared to the front. And you see here, I have the front neckline is lower than the back neckline. And I have here the armhole. So a very, very simple way of lengthening the back by this. But you cannot just do it and then follow your pattern letter by letter. You have to understand how you modify your pattern based on those extra stitches. But if you have larger arms, this is perfect, because you get these for free. And what it looks like, here I have knitted one arm. So what it looks like when the arm is knitted. Oh. Can you see it? Maybe. Here you see those extra lengthened for the back, and here I have picked up stitches from those and knitted the arm. So here are the underarm stitches, and then those I picked up, and these are like the live stitches for the arm. So doesn't really show anything strange. And also for this one you see that the neck is higher than the front. So that is my magic way of raising the back in a very simple way, without a need to struggle with short rows. I mentioned in another episode, when I showed this sweater, the Östan, that I felt like the front here became a little bit bubbly, and I thought that it was because of this continuous sleeve construction that it can become some extra fabric in here. And thank you so much for everyone that wrote and suggested how I could solve this problem. And I got the question if I have used short rows, and no, I haven't, but I have done the other method. And I don't think that that is because of that this is higher. I think it's more because of the continuous sleeve construction. And when you have the raglan, and you have the increases here, it's a little bit here in the increases that you are pulling. I talked about then if the neck is stretched, it's like stretched from these increases. It's this there where it's like pulls the neck down. But when it comes to the continuous sleeve, it's more like it's from the increases here on the shoulder that it pulls. And it means that it pulls from the side. And that means that you must think that I sound really strange. Oh. But it could be like it's crumbling a little bit here because of that it makes a little bit strange here. So depending on the constructions, the neckline can feel a little bit different, even if you do exactly the same short rows or lifting the neck in different way. It can be like this area is behaving differently. And I find that when I do the continuous sleeve, it curls a little bit, but I think that depends on how the fabric is being pulled or is pulling. So it's not a problem. I have done on this one, I have raised the back the same way as I always do, and it's nice and neat. When it comes to the back below the arm, you can also choose to have different shapes on your sweater. I don't think that. But either you have just straight, you continue with the same number of stitches, just going down, or you make a more fitted, like a waist, so you decrease some stitches and then you increase them again to have a more fitted, the sweater fitted in the waist. Or you have a more A-line, I think that this might be, and an A-line it is that it goes wider only wider, not go in, but it goes wider. And then you also increase stitches, not every row, but maybe every 5 centimeters or something, to make it a little bit more fitted over the shoulder, your hips. So there are different way of like shaping the body part. And then you can also do what I like to do. It is to do some, I don't know if I've done it, but to do some short rows to lengthen the back, the lower part of the back. And then I do those short rows as knitting back and forth and doing the turns, and then lengthening the back in that way. I don't know, here you can see it. So I have short in the front and it's a little bit longer in the back, and that I have done with short rows, like knitting here all the way back, then knitting a little bit longer, and all the way back turning and knitting a little bit longer, and going so on. And how many of those turns you make, it's of your preferences. You need to try it out. If you do too many, it can be a little bulky, and you need to put in some increases to even things out. Yeah, I think that it was it. Also, when you're going, when it comes to the body, of course, how long should you knit it? Should you have it cropped? Should you have it like hip length, or should you have it like longer, as like a tunic or a dress? That also based on your preferences, what you like to have, and how you should do with the part here. Should you use ribbing or garter or something? That's also very much depending on your preferences, but you don't want it to be rolled up. And if things are rolling up, it does that if you use stockinette, and that's because like the purl side needs more space than the knit side. So if you don't attach some extra like garter, or where you are knitting and purling in the same amount on both sides, then it will roll itself. So that is what I've used here. I wanted to have a rolled side here, but I have a rib first, so it won't roll everything. So the roll is because you have the stockinette, and not because the bind-off method. Even if some bind-off or cast-on methods roll even more extra, but it is that you have stockinette. And if you don't want it to roll, you cannot just do like 3 rounds of rib. It will still roll. You need to have a little bit more, usually at least. So, my advice, how you should modify your garment, it is to understand your body type. What does your body look like? What is the... take your measurements over the neck, the shoulders, the chest, the bust, and so on, the waist, the hip, and see what is the relation between those different measurements. Is your shoulders the same width as your hips, or how does it look like? And understand it. And I don't want you to hide your bodies, but I want you to knit garments that fits your bodies and make them look beautiful. I feel so sad when I see someone who has knitted a sweater with stranded yoke, beautiful, and then you see the picture and you see like, okay, it's too bulky up here. So it doesn't really fit that person. It makes the person look quite sad, but it's a beautiful sweater, and with a few modifications it could have been done in another way. And also, if someone with a larger bust adds a lot of garment or stitches to like not fill the bust, but to compensate or get it to fit the bust, but then it just continue being like a large tent instead of being able to modify so actually like fits your body. So yeah, try things and learn, understand your body and understand how you can modify a sweater. Even if you are not designing from scratch, you are using a pattern, but how you can actually adjust that pattern or modify from that pattern to fit your body, the body shape, and your preferences, how you want it to look, and what needs you have. Do you have a need for something you can cozy up in, or for something that is more airy and have a lower neckline, for example? Yeah, I guess that was that. I want you also to remember that when you think about the construction and how the fit will look like in the end, you also have to think about the fabric and how does the fabric behave. Because cotton and linen or in silk, they behave differently compared to, for example, unspun wool. To think that the unspun wool will have the same drape as something knitted in silk or cotton, then you will probably be disappointed. So it is difference in fabric. So construction plus fabric, and then you can have your preferred fit of your garment. Yeah. Another confusing episode, but I hope that you have learned something, and I hope that this have given you some courage to actually, in your next project, try out some things and see if you can modify it so it like fits you the way you want it to fit you. See you later. Bye bye. Hi again. Before we are finished with this episode, I want to give you my best tip of this episode. And as you see, I have changed into another sweater. This is a bought sweater, and it's constructed with, it's seamed, it's probably machine knitted in some kind of cotton, viscose, some kind of fabric. You have seams here, and your seams under the arm, and you have seam here at the shoulder and up here. So it's a typical, what I call the drop shoulder construction. And yeah, it's kind of nice. It's got this nice drape because it's some kind of plant-based fabric. Yeah, but it's something that I bought a long time ago. But I think that, yeah, it's a nice, pretty much nice fit on it. So my best tip for you this week is that I want you to start looking around yourself. When you are meeting someone who is wearing something knitted, look at that garment. How is it constructed? Do you think that it's hand knitted, handmade, or something that is bought? So how is it constructed? How is the fit on that person? Do you like the fit, or is it a poor fit? What do you think the fabric is? Is it some kind of woolen, acrylic, cotton? What is the fabric? And how does the fabric, what does it make for the fit? Does it make it drapey and a nice fit, or does it make it, I don't know, another kind of, not that flattering fit? And draw conclusions from that. What can I learn from that garment, that fabric, that fit, that construction that I can bring into my own knitting and construction of sweaters, and choosing the right yarn for this kind of sweater. So watch other people, maybe look in your wardrobe and try out other garments. It could be handmade, it could be bought, and just to look at it with the eyes of analyzing the construction and the fabric and the fit, to learn more. Maybe go into a shop and try out different things, and just see, to learn, how can I use this in my own knitting? And when I have been out looking at people, it hits me that many of the sweaters people are wearing that looks like it's knitted, it is machine knitted, and it is this kind of construction, and it makes me happy that I can knit my own garments, because it's not really that good constructed, and maybe not that good fit. So I feel so proud that I actually can make the garment myself the way I want them to be. Thank you for watching this a little bit confusing episode about sweater construction. And yeah, try to learn as much as you can about it by watching others, reading through patterns, but most of all, just try it out and see what fits your body, but also your way of knitting. I hope that I will see you in a coming episode, and until then, bye bye.